So when I was in high school, I set about, I thought it'd be really funny. So let me start over again. When I was in high school, I thought that if I just memorized other people's words, if I memorized like the funny people's words, I could be funny. If I memorized like romantic words, I could be romantic. I remember I just listening over and over to Sonnet 116, where William Shakespeare writes, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when adulteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within its bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with its brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved." And I remember thinking, like, I'm gonna get all these girlfriends. This is so great because I know this by heart, and I can have all these friends because I have Dumb and Dumber memorized. I have every other stupid movie memorized. Like that sense of like, I'm gonna memorize someone else's words and I'm gonna know them by heart. And that's one of the things, like, right, when it comes to when you memorize something, we say you know it by heart. And yet it's so interesting because I even forgot one of the lines in Sonnet 116. So I don't know it by heart because it's been 1,000 years since I was in high school. But this reality is when you memorize something, we say we know it by heart, meaning that we know it so closely, we know it so well, we know it so thoroughly that you don't even need to think about it. Those words actually are planted in your own heart. And that's partly true. To be able to speak from your heart, that's another way we talk about this, right? To be able to speak from your heart means that you're telling something that actually is so deeply and so core to a person. And that's how we want to speak, right? We want to speak from the heart. We want to know things by heart. We want to speak from the heart. And yet I think sometimes knowing something by heart and speaking from the heart are very different. Because knowing something by heart is knowing something external, but speaking from the heart, it does something unique. Speaking from the heart reveals something. In fact, that's what we want to talk about today. Because our words have power. See, that speech, those words, they have the power to reveal. In fact, Sirach says this in the first reading today. Sirach says, "A sieve is shaken, and husks appear, and so do one's faults when one speaks." Goes on to say, "One's speech discloses the bent of one's mind." And we know this, hopefully we know this, when we speak from the heart. What that does is words have the ability to disclose one's character. Words have the ability to reveal who I actually am, who we really are. Now, at the same time, there's a caveat that of course we know that words also have the power to disguise one's character. Words also have the power to disguise what one really is. In fact, I just recently watched this documentary on Netflix called The Tinder Swindler. It's about this guy who's traveled all over Europe, and he has basically just conned people into giving him money. I think at the end of his, con, he's free right now, but at the end of his con, he had swindled a number of people out of over $10 million. So he put himself off as a certain kind of person, and people would say he seemed so genuine, he seemed so legit, he seemed so real. It seemed like he would speak to me from his heart. Those words didn't disclose his heart. Those words disguised his heart. And we know we can all do that. I mean, we all do that on a daily basis. They say that we can get away with it too. Like truly, we can use our words to disguise our character, and we can get away with that up to a point because we can have our rehearsed words. Like we can know words by heart and just say them as if they're from our hearts. But the moment always comes when our words disclose the truth of our hearts. So I was just talking to a friend of mine. We were both giving a presentation, so we both had microphones on, and so the conversation went to I had to use the restroom, and he was like, "Hey, make sure you turn off the microphone," because we've all heard the stories, right, of someone, the priest at Mass, we're going to go right before Mass, goes in the bathroom, and is like, "Whoa, that's so embarrassing." So he's like, "Making sure you turn off the microphone." I'm like, "Absolutely, thank you, my friend. You're a good friend." And he said, "Actually, it gets even worse. It's even worse. He shared a story that was even worse than someone taking the microphone into the bathroom. It was someone who had been invited to a church. He'd been invited to a parish to give a talk. And people came from all over the city. People actually came from all over the region, and they packed this church. It was absolutely full. And this presenter, this speaker, before he went out, he was in the sacristy, like the room right off the front of the church. And he was kind of going off, and he said, "Yeah, this priest here, this pastor here, is just a clown. Like he's a total joke." Well, I better get out there now. And he walked out. And in this packed church, everyone's looking at, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone's looking at him, and he realized, wait a second, my microphone was on that entire time. This whole time he said, yeah, the pastor here, what a clown, what a total joke. Walked out, and everyone heard what he really thought, right? Everyone heard what was in his heart. That was disclosed. And I remember telling my friend, I'm like, what did he do? Like, what would you do? I think it would be one of those situations where it's like, I am so sorry you all came here. There is nothing I can say to you now. Because even if what I have to say to you is true, even if what I have to say to you is actually helpful or is good, the only thing you're going to know, the only thing you're going to remember is what I just said earlier. When you actually know what's in my heart. Because words have the power to disclose what's there. Because you could say, I now know the kind of person that's standing in front of me. Words have the power to disclose what's there. And in fact, this happened to me a couple of summers ago. Maybe it was last summer, shoot, I don't even know. It's pretty recent, but it was summertime. I was at my parents' place and all the siblings came back. And we were up late one night talking smart and stuff. And at one point, my older brother, who I love, and my older brother, I just respect him. I respect him, not disrespect him. I just respect him so much. We got to talking, and at one point he said something, and I don't know what it was. I was like, no, you listen to me. I'm like, you can't say that kind of thing. And I was like, no, this is, he was like, what? And I said, no, this is what you need to know about you. And I kind of went off and I was like, oh my gosh. And he's sitting there and he just kind of has a smile on his face. And it was really funny because he's in control. This man, he knows what he's about. And I'm like, no, here's what you need to know. And he's like, And I just got unleashed. And the next day we had mass in the house. First thing we had, like 8 a.m. 5 hours later, we were up late. And I'm like, oh shoot, I have to talk to my brother. I found him, because scripture says if you have something against your brother, leave your gift at the altar, be reconciled first, and then come back. I'm like, oh man, Mark, I'm so sorry. And my dad even came up and said, hey, heard that you had some words with your brother. I'm like, how did you know this already? Because it's such an out of character thing for me. Later on, he walked up next, we were walking, and he came up next to me and he's like, so, you got pretty mad at me. And I'm like, no, I wasn't mad at you. He's like, no, it was good. I'm like, what? I'm like, Mark, I'm so sorry. He's like, no, that was good. I'm like, what do you mean it's good? He says, Mikey, you always are so careful with your words. Like, I sometimes wonder if you ever actually say what you really think. And so it was really good to hear. And I thought, A, thank you for not destroying me, because he's a tough guy. B, that's true. Like what he said is, I'm often, not always, really careful with what I say. And I think for a good reason. It may be 3 good reasons. One is because I know that not everything I think needs to be said. Secondly, I know that not everything I think happens to be true. And third, I know that not everything I think is actually what I think. I mean, let's go back to the first one. I think the same thing is true for all of us. Not everything we think needs to be said. I mean, we don't all have to live online. We don't all have to live on Twitter or something. Because why? Because I think we all love people, or at least we all want to love people. And that we all know that just because I might think something doesn't mean it needs to be said, because that could actually wound people. You and I have the power. Our words not only have the power to disclose what's in our hearts, but our words also have power to destroy. And Jesus says, from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. Yeah, and if I was full of nothing but goodness and love and butterflies, then that no problem. I could say whatever I thought. But I know this about my heart. My heart is a mix. And I think your heart might be a mix too. And so I think maybe we need a filter. Because I want to filter out, I want to do what St. Paul said. St. Paul said, say only the good things people need to hear, things that will really help them. And if I want to be like that, then I need a filter. So my brother says, yeah, I think sometimes you're really careful with your words. I'm like, yes, because I want to say things that actually help people, not things that just needlessly hurt. The second thing is, I know that not everything I think is true. I don't know if you've ever had that situation where you think about one person or a situation and you realize you had it completely wrong. Like you were completely convinced that, oh my gosh, this is the story about this person's life. Or even like, you realize you're looking at the circumstance, you're looking at the situation, you're like, this is horrible. And someone hands you a Snickers and you're like, oh, I'm fine. It's like, I was just hangry. What St. James says about words, the power of words, he says, listen, just be quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to anger. Why? Because not everything you think is true. So be quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to anger. I think that that's one of the many reasons why St. Ignatius of Loyola, he was the founder of the Jesuits, so he founded this community of men who are going to live together and then go throughout the world evangelizing and being on mission. He said that everyone should be careful to interpret other people's thoughts, words, and deeds in the best possible way. In fact, he said it like this. He said, every good Christian ought to be ready to give a favorable interpretation to another statement than to condemn it. Like our inclination should be to give a favorable interpretation rather than condemn it. He says, going on, he says, but if you can't do that, if you can't do so, let him ask how the other understands it, how the other meant it. And if the other person understands it badly, well, you can correct him with love. And if that doesn't work, then let the Christian try all suitable ways to bring the other to a correct interpretation so that he may be saved. And that first inclination, that first impulse of being able to say that not everything I think is true. Just because I think you meant this doesn't mean you meant that. Just because I think that this is what you're all about doesn't mean that's what you're all about. Not everything I think needs to be said. Not everything I think is true. And also this last one, it's so humbling. Not everything I think is actually what I think. I think that's true about you too. Not everything we think is actually what we think, because our thoughts largely, I think, over the course of the day, go unexamined and unfiltered. We have so many thoughts. We have so many inputs. We have so many things that in competing voices that we might not even know what it is we actually think. And so the result is, I don't even know what's there. I don't even know what's in my heart. I don't even know myself. So we find ourselves in that place where, what do I think? I think there's three things we can do. First, we can stop and pray. So my last year of seminary, Archbishop Harry Flynn was the Archbishop of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and he had all the guys in my class over to his house, and we had a holy hour and then dinner afterwards. And before we had dinner, after the holy hour, he stopped and he said, okay, gentlemen, here's what I need you to do. I need you to make the decision that for your priesthood, you're going to make a holy hour every day. That at some point in the course of every single day, you're going to come into the Lord's presence, come before him in the Eucharist, in the Blessed Sacrament, and just have that time of prayer just with Jesus. And he said, here's why you need this. Not only because you need to grow in holiness, not only because you need to grow in intimacy with Jesus, but because of this. As a priest, you're going to talk a lot. As a priest, you're going to do a lot of things. You're going to make a lot of decisions. And you can get so busy that you go from one thing to the next. You can say one thing and then another. But if you come into the Lord's presence and have that time of silence, you're going to realize, and Jesus is going to remind you, there were things you said you shouldn't have said. There were things you should have said that you didn't say. There's things you did you shouldn't have done, and there's things that you didn't do that you should have done. And it's in that place of silence that you actually get to be reminded by Jesus. You just stop and pray and let him remind you, here is what you need. To ponder, to examine, okay, what are the thoughts and feelings of my heart? Can I put a name to them? Can I give a handle to them? Can I understand where they're coming from and what they mean? Because so often we have these thoughts going through our head that are largely unexamined and unfiltered. So we need to stop and pray. The second thing we need to do, I think, is we need to write. I think we may think we know what we think until we try to articulate it. Then we realize, I have no idea what I think. The hardest class I ever took in probably my entire life was my sophomore year in high school, AP American History class. Mr. Lottie, super good teacher, super tough teacher, really difficult class for me at my level at the time, because there's a lot of information, but every single week, Mr. Lottie had us write a thesis statement. And I got the lowest scores. I mean, almost the entire year, I got the lowest scores I've ever gotten basically in my entire life on Mr. Lottie's thesis statement. What it was one page, just had handwritten even. You had to make a statement and you had to back it up. And I filled up the page with all these words. And Mr. Lottie, every week, he'd look at all these words and say, where's your thesis? Where's your thesis statement? Where's your proof? Where's your evidence? What is it you actually think? Have you made a case for anything here? Or have you just put a bunch of words on the page? And I realized I didn't know how to think. I didn't know how to say, what is it that I actually am trying to say? What do I think? So writing actually helps us with that, helps us figure out what is it that we think? What is it that's in our hearts? In fact, I referenced him a couple weeks ago. Michael Hyatt is an author and speaker and whatnot, businessman. And he has this saying that I remember hearing him say like a dozen years ago. He said, thoughts untangle themselves passing over the lips and through pencil tips. That our thoughts in our brains are just like, again, largely unfiltered and kind of unacknowledged or uninspected, investigated, but they become untangled as they pass through our lips, as we speak and just kind of work it out, and through pencil tips as we write these things down. So my invitation is to write it out, to speak it out, and then we can learn something. Because words disclose what's in our hearts. Words disclose what's in our minds. In fact, again, what did Sirach say? Sirach said, the fruit of a tree shows the care it's had. Not carrots had, care it has had. The fruit of a tree shows the care it has had. So too does one's speech disclose the bent of one's mind. So not only do we stop and pray, not only do we write, but there's this third element. It's called the law of exposure. And the law of exposure is a psychological principle. And basically what it means is what's in my mind or what's in my heart is there because I put it there. If I investigate my thoughts, those thoughts are there because I put them there. What I expose myself to shapes me. That's the law of exposure. And so I have this love-hate relationship with Instagram. I think it's kind of cool. There's some workout tips and whatnot, that are on there. But also, I find myself, I have to delete it like every other day because I'm like, I don't need this, not only a waste of time, but also I find myself wanting things I've never wanted in my entire life. I've scrolled through and there's an advertisement for the best pair of pants, gentlemen, you'll ever own. I'm like, well, I want the best pair of pants I've ever owned. There's an advertisement for a cutting board. Not only is this cutting board bamboo, but also has these plastic containers. You chop your vegetables and slide them right into the plastic containers, put them right in the fridge. Genius, I need that thing. But not only is there like the stuff, crazy thing is, I find myself, if I expose myself to Instagram, wanting something I've never wanted in my life, wanting someone else's life. I'm like, I love my life. I'm so grateful to Jesus for what he's called me to, but it's so strange. The law of exposure is real. What we put in our minds is there because we've exposed ourselves to. What's in our hearts are there because we put them there. This is anything from Instagram to the TV shows we watch, the movies we watch, the songs we listen to. I was talking to a Focus missionary the other day who was describing how at Focus Training, one of the things they do to kind of reveal how culture influences us is they say, okay, we're going to go through some lyrics of popular songs. These are songs you all know. These are probably even songs that you all listen to, but have you paid attention to the lyrics that you're putting into your mind every day? And so without the beat, without cool harmonies, without any kind of with just here, and also in the context where everyone hears a missionary, and the person who just gave a talk was a priest or a religious sister, like kind of thing. And we're just going to read these lyrics of songs that you know and you might have just listened to in the gym this morning. And she said it gets really, really uncomfortable. And I was looking up lyrics because I was going to do that here. And I thought, I am so uncomfortable that this is not the context. Actually, it was so bad that I was like, oh, shoot, I can't even do this as an example. I have to describe the example. I can't even use the example because the number one songs or the top songs of 2021, I thought there's not even one example here that I could use as an example that wouldn't be censored by the YouTube or whatever, but it'd be censored by parents hopefully watching this. It's that bad. And we realize this is what you're putting in your heart every time you listen to this song. This is what you're planting every time you listen to this song. Sirach. The fruit of a tree shows the care it has had. So too does one's speech disclose the bent of one's mind. Because this is the last thing. Not only do words disclose our hearts, words also direct our hearts. Not only do words reveal, but words also reframe. So the words we actually choose to use and the words we choose to put into our minds, into our hearts, they can direct our minds and our hearts. So there's an author, his name's James Clear. Remember him using this example a bunch of years ago. He said when you're talking to someone and maybe you want to get healthier, maybe you want to stop eating sweets, or maybe you want to stop being lazy, maybe you want to start exercising, maybe start going to bed on time. He says you need to change how you speak. And it's a simple change, but powerful change. He said this and said, someone offers you a piece of cake, saying you want to get away from sweets. Typically we'd say, oh, no, I can't have cake because I'm on a diet. He says, just change one word. No, I don't eat cake. That I can't eat it to I don't do that is a significant shift. That sense of like, I can't stay out late, I need to go to bed. No, I'm not going to stay out late. I'm going to bed. That sense of like, oh, I have to go work out. No, I get to go work out. Those subtle shifts in how we use our words can actually direct our hearts and actually can change our insides because words have power. They have power to disclose, they have power to disguise, and they have power to direct our hearts. And so what we're going to do is, starting next week, on the first Sunday of Lent, we're going to start a new series. And the series is based around Lent, but it's really, we're going to spend the next 7 weeks with Jesus. But not just with Jesus. We're going to spend the next 7 weeks with Jesus on the cross. Because on the cross, Jesus uttered words that came from the depths of his heart. He didn't speak these words. He didn't know these words by heart. They came from his heart. And so for the next 7 weeks, we're going to hear his words. For the next 7 weeks, we're going to ponder his words. For the next 7 weeks, we're going to stop and we're going to pray with his words. And these words will disclose the depths of our Lord and Savior's heart. And these words, if we stop, if we pray, if we ponder, if we write them out, if we live them, if we expose ourselves to them, those words, his words, will direct our hearts. So that's beginning next Sunday. I'm going to spend all of Lent with words, the words of Jesus from the heart of the cross.